Thank you for joining the Resilient Cyber Show. My name is Chris Hughes, along with my co-host, Dr. Nikki Robinson.
Hey, everybody.
And today we're joined by Joe Lewis. Joe, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. I've been following you online for a little bit here. We've exchanged a lot of comments and stuff, but first time I've ever actually chatted with you via video, so I'm excited. But for folks that don't know you or your background or what you're up to, do you mind telling us a bit about your current position as well as how you got to it?
Sure. So I am the Chief Information Security Officer for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So that's a very long title. What it basically means I am the Senior Cyber Program Director for the CDC. The path to the CISO's desk is not a direct line. I got to tell you, it's very much kind of a bob and weave and very, very highly specific. My path actually came from IT operations. I was a U.S. Marine for 7.5 years, and in that time, I did IT operations, and then I ran away from IT for 3 years to go work in the private sector. And I went as far and as fast as I could get. I worked in the production and operations space as a production manager, which and we could talk about this more, but it really helped kind of in service to revenue generating activities as a cost center on a profit and loss. And so I see a lot of corollaries there between that and cybersecurity. But after that, I became a federal employee, which I've been doing for the last, almost 14, 15 years. I've been at 3 different agencies. I've been at the Department of the Army. I worked for the Department of Energy for about 1.5 years. And I've been with CDC for about 5-6 months now.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, you have such a great background, which we are going to dive into too. But I wanted to ask you, as someone who's been a CISO for 5-6 months, sort of stepping into this role, how's it going? How are you feeling? How have the first few months been? How's everything been?
So if you'd asked me 30 days ago, I probably would have had a lot more bags under my eyes, and I might have had some more apoplectic type responses. But truth be told, it's been really, really great. It is a vital mission that most people don't recognize exists. We are in the public health space, which is slightly nuanced difference from the healthcare space, insofar that we're focused on very, very broad topics that affect the public health. So things like COVID-19 vaccines and testing data. And I guess I didn't realize prior to my arrival that we are a data-driven organization, and we're in 60 countries. We have 7,000 employees worldwide. I mean, it's a very, very large footprint with a really, really critical mission. And so the agency's been great. Everybody's been very, very welcoming. I finally figured out enough that I can get some sleep at night, so that's good. But I love it. It's been great.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't even imagine popping into like that role with that many people, and I'm sure that there's a ton of nuance and all kinds of things. So that's awesome to hear. And one of the ways that you and I sort of got connected is our sort of one foot in the door with being a practitioner, one foot in the door with academia and research. So I'm curious, with your background in academia as an adjunct professor, and now with your cybersecurity and all this executive and leadership experience, where would you say sort of maybe some of that experience with academia or research comes in, or how does that blend of experience sort of help you in what you do?
I'm really glad you asked that question, because I feel like first and foremost, you need to start from the place that you recognize that you're an unfinished product. And academia and research and leadership and management training, self-reflection and all of those things, that all stems from that place where you recognize that you need to continue to improve and you need to work on yourself. And so from that perspective, having that background in academia, having that background in cyber, and then now as an executive, a senior executive in the federal workforce, they've all done a really nice job helping set me up for longer term success, right? Because I recognize that I'm not where I need to be. I'm never going to be where I want to be. So as long as I can continually improve, I think that's good. So.
Yeah, just a quick comment before I turn it over to Chris, because I feel like one of the same ways I love academia and research and constantly challenging myself, because I don't know everything. And I feel like the more I research, the more I'm like, I just know nothing. I have so much I have to learn. And it's been such a beneficial area to complement what I do as a security architect.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, there's a great book by Christian Espinoza that's called The Smartest Person in the Room. And the smartest person in the room should not be the person that's in charge. And I recognize that. I don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room. If you ask Michael Dell, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, right? And so the more I realize that I don't know, the more I realize I want to know. And so it's been helpful in that way to kind of broaden my perspective.
Yeah, a couple of things you said there jumped out to me is like the smartest person in the room. I've read that book. It's actually a great book. And it, kind of like the same thing with like big fish, little pond, or, those kind of sayings is like, you're not going to grow if you're not surrounded by people who can push you or know more than you, or you can learn from, or things like that. So I love that kind of perspective. And then also you and Nikki went back and forth a little bit about how much there is to learn and how you never really know it all. And, throughout my career, you can go through periods where it feels overwhelming. Like, I just don't know enough. Like, how am I even in this position? But you could also flip that paradigm and say, wow, there's so much I have to learn. There's so much opportunity here for growth. But it really depends how you look at it. And that really dictates how you feel about things. I wanted to ask you too, I when I bring people on, I often, say, hey, is there anything you're passionate about or something you want to talk about? When I asked you, you brought up the concept of servant leadership. So I wanted to ask you, with regard to servant leadership, what does that mean to you more broadly? And then what does it mean to you as a CISO and in the cybersecurity career field too?
I'm glad we have an opportunity to talk about that, because I feel like in my peer and partner Rob Wood, he and I have exchanged a lot of conversations about kind of the softer side of cyber. But the reality is, I think we as technologists take people that are good technologists and make them leaders, and that doesn't always translate well, because the skills that make you a good technician or a technologist are not the skills that make you a good leader. And sometimes there's a very, very stark gap between the training, the coaching, the mentoring that they need in order to be effective. And so for me, servant leadership was about recognizing, one, I'm an unfinished product, and two, that that is a mechanism for me, both personally gratifying, but also extremely rewarding for the staff, to be an effective leader and manager. And so bottom line, the precepts of servant leadership are about inverting the pyramid. Okay, so if you think of your typical hierarchical pyramid, you've got your leader at the top and you've got your frontline employees at the very, very bottom. Well, who are the people that are interfacing with our customers? The people at the very, very bottom, right? So if you flip the pyramid upside down, you say, well, if I'm supporting the people that are interfacing with our customers for maximum value, then the job of the supervisor is to enable the employee. The job of the manager is to enable the supervisor. And my job at the very, very tip of the pyramid, at the very bottom, is to make sure everybody's successful by meeting their needs and their requirements to be successful. And so operating from that premise, there's a ton of really great literature out there. Anything by Jim Hunter, the Servant, The Culture, The World's Most Powerful Leadership Principle, those are all great books that helped kind of frame how I approach being a leader in this space.
Yeah, I love it. And I love that paradigm flip you talked about, because it's so true. And when you think about that, that means you have a lot of lines of communication, a lot of interactions with other humans, a lot of people, a lot of communication. But when we look at the career field, all of our conversation around is around DevSecOps and, encryption and quantum and zero trust and on and on. But you're emphasizing the role of the soft skills that make you successful or are critical to be a good leader. Why do you think that soft skills, I know this is another thing that Rob Wood's a big proponent of, and we've had him on in the past, but why do you think soft skills are so overlooked when it comes to cybersecurity? It's always focused on the technical side.
That's a really great question. And I think it's about how we select people for leadership positions in technology and cyber positions, right? It's the Peter principle. We're going to take somebody that's a great technologist and make them a supervisor because they were good at technology. And I think we're not looking at the right skill sets. We're not looking at the right attributes, or we're not providing the right coaching, training, and mentoring along the way for that to happen. But for me, it's so much more important, because if not, we do get bogged down in those technical weeds, right? And the role of the CISO is to be able to communicate in business terms to the executive leadership how cyber risk translates to organizational risk. And if you are not an empathetic communicator, or if you're not able to speak in business terms or understand how to be an effective leader, then you're never going to do those things. And the last piece I'll say about this is that being a good leader means cyber's just a team sport now, right? Humans are our weakest link, unfortunately, and so everybody needs to be on the front lines, and that requires relationship building. It requires your ability to communicate effectively, and all of those are soft skills. Those are not technology skills at all.
Yeah, I feel like relationship building has been one of my biggest assets when it comes to being in cybersecurity, right? Because whether I'm talking to a developer or a leadership or whoever it might be, building a relationship with someone, that's going to help me maybe make a product more secure, do better risk assessment, whatever it might be. And relationship building is the first step of getting all of those things done. Don't mind my puppy in the background, just destroying everything.
That's
So to switch gears just a little bit, since you are someone that's, you're relatively new to the CISO role, you have a ton of executive and leadership experience, but what kind of surprised you about the CISO role? Were there any challenges or anything that was surprisingly good or exciting about the CISO role?
Well, so I think it's probably more organizational than anything, but what I was most surprised with was my staff is so ready for new direction, right? The consummate professionals in the cybersecurity program office at the CDC, they've been protecting this agency before I got here, and they will be protecting it after I leave. But it was really, really gratifying to feel the energy when I started talking about the new direction, right? And really, we're trying to morph our organization to more of a customer experience, customer driven service type of organization, and that's been met with resounding, positivity, and that's something that I guess I'm a little surprised about, and in a good way, obviously.
That's great. I love that answer. I know I feel like what a pleasant surprise, right? To walk in and be open to change or open to, trying something new. So as someone who is probably hiring security practitioners or looking for potentially like new talent, if anyone's looking to move into a cybersecurity management role or maybe thinking about that sort of next step in their career, is there anything that you look for in a skill set or you think would be helpful to sort of build as a skill set when moving into a leadership role? And then you mentioned some books, if you had any other books or references that you might recommend.
For sure. So I think, especially given my understanding and my realization that technical skills are not the kind of the only thing that we need at this point. I'm definitely looking for people that understand how to build relationships. I'm looking for people that are effective communicators, people that understand risk, which I think we as cybersecurity practitioners talk about risk a lot. But if you think about what risk is, it's probability times impact. Well, impact is a mission or an operational impact. And so we need to be understanding of business and operations in order to be able to have risk informed decisions. And so those are the kinds of things that I'm really, really looking for, especially for anybody that's looking to be a leader in this type of rapidly evolving agile environment. Books, how much time do we have? Because I read like 30 books last year. So there's a series of books by the Arbinger Institute, which are great. There's one called Leadership and Self-Deception, which I really love. There's a follow-on book to that called The Anatomy of Peace. And that really helped focus me from an empathetic communication perspective. It talks about how two people walk into a communication, each with their own desires and their own kind of inputs that they want to get out of a conversation, and being empathetic to understanding that somebody else has something that they want to get out of the conversation makes you a better listener and not just waiting for your turn to talk. And so let's see what else. I read Team of Teams by General McChrystal, Make Your Bed by Admiral McCraven. I mean, it just as much time as you've got, I could talk about books because I love it. It's one of my passions for sure.
I'm laughing because I've read a lot of those, like Make Your Bed and other books like that. A lot of great books in that list you rambled off. So I wanted to ask, we talked about the soft skills a lot, but that being said, in the federal space and in cyber in general, there's a lot of emphasis on things like the Cybersecurity Executive Order, OMB memo, Zero Trust, software supply chain security. So as a leader, new to the federal CISO role, how are you calibrating yourself? And then how do you ensure that, your team does have the technical depth, to tackle some of these initiatives, basically, because it does take, obviously some technical expertise too.
Right. So I think it starts with a firm understanding that we need to be investing in people, both at the technological and the human side, in order for them to be successful. Because you're right, our technologies adapt too quickly, our requirements are changing rapidly, and we need to be on the front end of those things. I think there are some people out there that are hesitant to invest in training their staff because the worry is, well, they're going to leave. I'm going to train them and invest in them. They're going to leave. Well, for me, it's great. If they leave better than when they got here, then that's a good thing. And while we are able to take advantage of their skill sets, great, that's good for us. And I think if you start from that perspective, you'll realize that investing in people is always going to be a good thing. In terms of emerging requirements, sometimes it feels like they're just coming every week, every month. It happens fast. And a lot of these are unfunded. And I want to make sure everybody recognizes that when these new requirements come out, it's like, hey, go do these things and then analyze how much money you'll need to do them. And then, by the way, there's no money, right? You're like, well, how do I do all this? And I'll tell you how you do it, at least how we're doing it, which is we modernize our way into new requirements, right? So we just inject these new requirements into our development life cycles. So as we're retiring old capabilities, as we're modernizing tools, we're doing so with these new requirements in mind, so that we just make that a part of the fabric of our decision making, right? And so from that perspective, we can, eat the elephant one bite at a time, as opposed to just being handed a massive set of requirements that we know we're never going to meet.
So from that perspective, right, with the number of different things that are going on, zero trust, S-bombs, like everything that's happening sort of in the industry, are you more worried about zero trust, software supply chain security, some of the big topics, or are you more worried on the AI ML space, things like ChatGPT and all the others that are coming out? What are you thinking more about these days?
So there are many things that keep me awake at night, right? It just how much it's like if you fragment it out, there's a lot that helps keep you awake at night. But I think not being an inhibitor to progress is probably my biggest concern, because the federal government is great at making bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy, and that's not that is not how you derive value for those executing the mission. So making sure that my own internal processes are agile enough and nimble enough to be able to respond in the event that we have a new technology, a disruptive technology like ChatGPT or something like that, that we're not just going to slam the door and say, no, you can't do that, because that's the opposite of being supportive. And so that said, I mean, AI machine learning is definitely something that we're grappling with as an agency. It's the entire federal government is trying to wrap their arms around. Even the White House is looking at options for, do we need a national policy on how federal agencies should approach the use of AI and machine learning and natural language processors and all these other things. And so, what my end goal is to not have to invent the wheel or reinvent the wheel. I want to work with my other federal peers and find out ways that they're successfully using these technologies and doing so in a smart and secure way, and then leverage those for CDC.
Yeah, great. I think it's top of mind for all of us in sort of a, how can it be used? How will it be used? How is it already being used? Sort of, and how do we secure it or understand how to really use it and secure it? Well, that's going to take me to my last question for you, which we ask everyone, and I'm excited to hear your answer based on your experience in leadership and cybersecurity and IT operations too. But what does cyber resiliency mean to you?
Cyber resiliency means that cybersecurity derives value for the business, right? And I when I first got to the CDC, I let everybody know that private sector's already figured out that the business drives the cyber doesn't drive the business. And that's what cyber resiliency is, right? If we can generate, demonstrate, and continue to provide value to those that are executing the mission, then they're going to be more willing to come to us when they have new and emerging requirements and say, hey, how do I do this smartly? How do I do this securely? And that's kind of that's the point where you've reached utopia, right? Where we can say, hey, I'm now not only providing value to your existing requirements and your existing business needs, but you're smart. We're smart enough now that we can have this conversation on, you coming back whenever you've got new requirements. And so that's kind of what resiliency means to me.
Yeah, I really like that answer. It's definitely unique compared to what we've heard. Typically, a lot of people talk about being able to withstand and recover and bounce back, which is all valid. But you talked about providing value to the business, and we've heard a lot about, cybersecurity is needing to shift to be a business enabler. And obviously, we're hearing a lot about, building cyber in versus bolting it on. You're talking about the human interaction piece, where if you show value, you show that you're going to provide support and be a collaborative entity, people are more likely to engage you early on versus coming, you come after the fact, say, oh, they're already using this. They just didn't engage us because they view us as an inhibitor, basically.
For sure. Yeah. And I got to tell you, as the federal CISO, the question becomes, well, how do I get an authorization to operate? Like, whoa, we're asking the wrong questions, guys, right? Like what we should be asking is, how do I procure securely? How do I develop securely? How can you help me with your existing service offerings to make sure that when we get to the authorization stage, it's not such an arduous process? And I think that's where that value-driven conversation comes from. That's where we say, what we're working on right now is building a service catalog. Here's all the services that we're offering. Here are all the NIST controls that we can help make compliant for you as a part of the authorization process, be it common controls, inheritable controls, all of those things, and say, instead of 800 controls, maybe you only have to worry about 30 or 40 of them because we're going to take care of the rest. And that's a value-driven conversation, and that's not I don't think that's a way that the federal government typically thinks about things. I think it's very much the old days of information assurance where this is where you go to hear no, and that's not what I want. That's not the approach I'm taking. So
I love that answer. I think it's such a such a refreshing take, but such a needed take. How can we make things easier, for all the people that are consuming security, right? Security services. So I love that. I wanted to say a huge thank you, Joe, for joining us today. As my dog goes nuts behind me. Thank you so much. We got to talk about leadership, cybersecurity, and everything in between. So that's going to take us out for this week. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see everybody next week.
Thanks, folks.